All right, let's get started. This is the panel on having a life. You can't do it all.
Yeah. I know we're competing against Facebook and ad sales, so thanks for joining us. So, just a bit about how I started Planet Princeton, sort of the backstory. Krystal Knapp from Planet Princeton.
And David Boraks, I'm a Lion alum. I used to run websites north of Charlotte, davidsonnews.net and corneliusnews.net.
So, I was always kind of a workaholic when I worked at the newspaper. I was happy to work like 60 hours a week or more because I loved what I did, and like passion is a really important part of, versus pay. That's like the most important thing to me, and has always been that I love what I do. And then I took a buyout. I traveled to the Middle East. I came back. I was working as a freelancer. I was making really good money hustling. And then the new houses slashed their freelance budget, and all of a sudden I was covering a story a week when I'd been covering like 3 stories a day. And my boyfriend at the time created so I started to have this like, my website was just like a little twinkle in my eye at the time. I hadn't really fleshed out how I was going to do this. And for my birthday, my boyfriend created a logo for me. It's like the best thing that came out of that relationship. I was joking about. I was like, oh, the logo. When I see him now, I'm like, oh, the logo. But and then so I had a Facebook page where I put all the little like stories and tidbits I didn't have homes for, and like my family followed it, my friends, and then Hurricane Irene hit, and I went from having like 200 followers to like 2,000 in 3 days. And I just started a Twitter account, like literally 10 followers, and I had like 3,000 all of a sudden. And I was just going by the seat of my pants for a while. Because with the hurricane, coverage lasted a few months because of all the damage, and I was just constantly posting on Facebook, and it would automatically post to Twitter. I didn't even have a website at that time. I think I had like a beta version of what I might like it to look like. I had no business plan, nothing. And so I was just like posting every day, like as if I was still in the newsroom. And, I kept doing this, actually, I'm embarrassed to say, for like months before I sort of stepped back and said, how am I going to make this a business? How am I going to make money? But even then, as a journalist, it was so like seductive to be stuck in this daily churn of publishing stories, and and so my following, my reach started to grow. So my attitude was like, I'm just going to work harder, right? I'm just going to keep going. So I'm just going to keep working harder. Well, there are only so many hours in the day, and you need sleep. I was sleeping like 5 hours a night sometimes. And then a second hurricane hit, and I slept on the floor of the police station for like 2 hours a night for 2 weeks. Just crazy things. And then there were grants offered to start sites in news deserts. So I decided, hey, I'm going to start a second site in Trenton. I received like $4,000, which is really not much to start it. But I said, well, I'm not going to be the writer. I'll hire someone. And, I look back now and think, wow, that was like really like magical thinking, right? How was I going to do both of these when I hadn't even had my first site wasn't even really sustainable yet. So I got totally burnt out, and the grant ran out, and when that person wasn't getting paid anymore, they were offered like they were able to leverage that job at Planet Trenton, my second site, to become the head of the arts organization in town. And when I lost that person, I had nothing for that website, right? I didn't have any backup plan or anything. It was like a really fragile situation. So, so I had to learn a lot of hard lessons along the way, like first in terms of managing it as a business. First of all, as a journalist, seeing it as a business, and then really a big thing for me was being open to help. So in the beginning, I had some freelancers, and what I found sometimes was like it was more work to train them or edit their story. I'm like, I could have gone and written this in half the time. So then I said, well, I'm going to keep doing it all myself. But really what I found is I had to learn to invest in people at the front end, coach them, and give people a try, give them a chance. And then also like hire slow and fire fast. So, like, to take some time to find the right people. Don't just jump when the first person comes along who wants to write for you. There are online tools where you can give people tests, editing tests, things like that, skills tests. Look at their resume, look closely at their clips. Resumes that have typos, I won't hire someone who submits something to me with typos in it. That's been really helpful. And then also, so like I do web design too. So that's a service I offer my clients. I'm getting paid $50 to $75 an hour to do web design. Yet I'm spending a lot of my time doing calendar entries for my website. So I could be paying someone $15 an hour to do that, so I could go out and make $50 to $75 an hour, right? So I eventually hired someone to manage the calendar for me. I also automated it with Modern Tribe events. You can have a community, there's a community plugin so that, and it's worth the money, I think it's like $100 a year. So a lot of my nonprofits, they enter their own events and they can even go in and edit them. So that's really eased my workload. And I've also used a virtual assistant because I get maybe 700 or 800 emails a day now. So I have an assistant who goes through my emails and sorts through them and helps me figure out what's important, things like that. They do small projects. I'm still using contractors. I haven't gotten to the point where I hire someone. But on the business side, after like searching and having disappointing experiences with ad salespeople, like when I find someone decent, they put on their LinkedIn profile that they were my ad sales director. I'm so close to New York City. New York startups started poaching those people. They'd see it they'd search on LinkedIn for them. So I got Planet Trenton going recently again because of some events that happened in Trenton. There was a mass shooting there. I happened to be at the mass shooting. I was trampled and I was knocked. And I had a horrible concussion. All these people in Trenton kind of rallied to help me and help revive the site because people saw all of a sudden, Trenton needs something positive. So, so one person who was writing for me, it turns out she and her husband own a business consulting firm. So we're just in the middle of negotiating a deal where they will take on the business side of both of my websites and do all the ad sales and event promotions. So,
Krystal, I heard you say the phrase hired someone about 15 or 20 times there, which I guess I would say that that's something when we're talking about having your own life, we are talking about not trying to do it all yourself, which is the title of this panel. And I can't say that, I can't emphasize that enough. And when I started my business, which ran from 2006 to 2015, 9 years, running a couple of small local news websites north of Charlotte, North Carolina, we became wildly successful from a readership and traffic standpoint, and not quite so wildly successful from a financial standpoint, which is why I ended up shutting it down in 2015. But there were also personal, like family issues along the way as well. And when I first started it, it was kind of a lark. I said, hey, I can use a blog, I can use a WordPress blog to get a news website up and running in my small town. And it was fun at the very beginning, but I realized right away, about 6 months in, I had to make a decision. What am I doing here? Is this just for fun or is this a business? And the minute that I decided that I was going to try and make a business out of it, I immediately realized the responsibility that I was taking on. And that responsibility included making sure I was there regularly for my readers so that they would get what they wanted out of my site. And also, increasingly, as I added employees, I had to be responsible for those employees. And so the pressure on me and the amount of time I spent ramped up pretty quickly. And I got to the point after a few years where I really was doing it all the time, like people talk about. And we've heard this in so many different discussions this weekend that people talk about doing it in the middle of the night and all that. And you really do get to that point where it is all-consuming. And I think I did hit a peak after a few years of doing this and being under pressure and trying to get revenues up, where I'm sorry to say it was the most important thing in my life at the expense of my family and friends. And it's something that we just need to keep in mind, that this can't be everything. There's got to be more to it. And I did have in the back of my mind and then in the front of my mind, after I kind of realized where I was, that part of the object here, if you want to keep this thing going, is to figure out how to make it sustainable. And sustainable means the business runs without you. It also means you get time off. And when I began to think of it that way, it really changed my thinking about how I was doing things. And I had to start to let some things go. Now, I hired a calendar editor at one point for $15 an hour, and they took over about 12 hours of work a week, which was more than I was actually putting into it myself. And early on, I hired a business manager who started out at 20 hours a week, and she worked herself into a full-time job and became essentially a business partner who helped out. She managed the business side, she oversaw advertising, she ran the website, and she was a strategy partner with me. We talked about where our company was going and made plans together for where it was going. And she was a paid employee. She wasn't a technical equity business partner. But having a second person to worry about some of the things that I was worried about made such a huge difference to me. And we both stayed up in the middle of the night thinking about things at that point. But we also did try to make time for everything else. And so having another person to share the burden with allowed me to think about it a little bit differently. And I started, instead of working all the time, I tried to cut back and to quit work at a certain time and say, I have a deadline. Do you have a deadline? So I would try to be finished by 5 or 6 o'clock every day. We built into our schedule, my partner Lindsay and I, we built in some downtime, some playtime. Friday afternoons, if we could swing it, we would go out for lunch and have a glass of wine. And if we could do it, we would stop work at in the afternoon on Fridays and not carry it out. So we would just have some time to decompress. And actually, we jokingly refer to those as our business meetings, but all of our best business meetings were done on Friday afternoons over wine. We'd talk about how things went, where we were going. And that was really important within the business to take that time away from the crunch that you're doing all the time. With my family, I did work out of my home, so I did get to see my kids regularly when they came home from school and all of that. But, after about 7 years or so, 8 years, I was spending so much time on the business that it became an issue in my marriage, and I actually did go through some marriage counseling. And that counseling, I never thought I would do something like that, but it was really important for me to kind of refocus on what was important to me in my life, and it helped me to take the business and put it down a shelf a little bit and to remember that there was more important things. And I did always try to make sure that there was time for things like vacations. And I know the hardest thing about what we do is untethering yourself from your phone and from the email and the text messages that are commanding you to get out and cover something. And so I did devise lots of strategies, some by hiring people or getting contract writers or whatever, or full-time employees. I came up with strategies that allowed me to take vacations. So I did manage to get a vacation at the beach in North Carolina every summer for most of the time I did my business. I took time off every Thanksgiving, usually a big chunk of that week. These are obviously times when everything slows down in your world, there's no ad sales going on, there's very little news going on, but I made sure to try and take those times. And you got to plan for that. If you're going to be off from Wednesday till the following Monday of Thanksgiving week, you can put up nothing on your site, or you can plan a couple of things that you can put up there. You've got to plan ahead and kind of strategize about that to give yourself the time to do that. There's always something that, invades on that, and I'm not going to say I never touched the site during those times, but the more hands-off I could be, the better it was for my ability to come back after that and be charged up again. I did get to the point where I actually took some very ambitious vacations. I went at one point, I think it was summer of 2011, I had an editor for my second site, and I had my business manager and ad salespeople and some contract employees, and I actually was very comfortable leaving. Well, I'll qualify that in a minute. But I was able to go to Asia for 2 weeks and be pretty much away from my site. I did arrive in Taipei on the first day of the trip. I got up, flipped open my laptop, sat down, all right, what's going on, and got my instant messenger up and sent a message to Lindsay, my number 2, and said, how's it going there? And she reamed me out. And I'm forever grateful that she was reminding me that you're supposed to be on vacation. And it's so hard to do this, but I did manage to take those 2 weeks not looking at the site. And I realized also that if you have employees working for you, you're not showing them any respect if you are checking in on them while you're on vacation. You need to just trust them and prepare them, but trust them to do that. And I also got a trip to Europe in there at one point, and it required me to really mentally release a lot on that, and that's really hard to do when it's your business. But if you have the right people around you who can help you with it, you can do that. And I guess the big lesson for all of this, for me, is, could your business run without you? How are you planning ahead to the point where your business could run without you for a long weekend or for a week off? Or ultimately, if your goal for your business is to grow it and maybe sell it or something, can your business run without you in that respect as well? And so I spent the last 4 years trying to get to that point, and I felt pretty comfortable that I had the right people working with me. We had problems always with finding ad salespeople that could keep the revenues coming in, but from the standpoint of just being able to take some time off, I think I got to that point. And it really did. It's very much of a mental thing, and so I think that should be your goal, is to think about it in that way.
Did you work out of an office, or did you work from home? Or?
We worked out of the front room of my home, which was kind of a home office, and at one point we had 4 people in there, which was way too many. We did look around for office space in our area, and it was pretty expensive, and we actually looked at one that the price was right, but there was like water dripping from the ceiling, and again, my business associate, Lindsay, and I looked at each other and we said, we could stay in your front room and it's very comfortable there, Anyway, we ultimately decided to remain kind of in that small space. I mean, it's very hard you got to build in, I guess what I would say is that if I could have built in a little more revenue to pay for that, I would have gone to another space. Actually, now, at that time there was not such a thing as co-working, but now co-working would be the answer for me. At least in Charlotte, North Carolina, and even in Davidson, north of Charlotte, where I am, there are multiple options for co-working spaces where for a very small amount of money, you get all the trappings of an office and everybody can feel like they're going to an office. And I think that also would help to separate the work and life. I will say I'm pretty disciplined, so I would get up in the morning and I'd do my things in my room and in the kitchen and see the kids off, and then I would go to my office as if I were going to an office, which made a big difference for me. And I actually had been working out of my house for about 7-8 years before that, working for a newspaper in New York City, and my office schedule was I went into the office at 9 o'clock and started my workday, and I quit at 5, and I already was pretty well disciplined to think about that space as my workspace. Now, there's always night meetings and that sort of thing, but anyway.
When I started my site, I basically worked from home. Then all of a sudden I realized, I just spent the last 3 days in my sweatpants. Has anyone had that experience where you realize, you haven't really gone out? And so then I started using a work co-share space 2 days a week, and then 1 day a week I go work at a library and one at a coffee shop. And it's made me much more productive. I just feel like getting out of that space you're around all the time. I'm like, wow, I got 3 days worth of work done in 1 day at the work co-share space. So that's really been helpful.
It's funny, my wife has just turned the former world headquarters, which is what we called it. The world headquarters is now a living room and bar area in our house, and it feels, I actually have not gone into that space more than a few times since I shut down my business. I was that disciplined to think of it as my workspace, and so now it's got a little different feeling. There's some wine there in the rack, and but actually I'm curious, how many of you work out of your houses? And how many have other spaces? And what are your other spaces?
Co-working space downtown. So I do the newsletter and some stuff in the morning at home, and then I go downtown.
What are other non-home spaces?
I have a partnership with the local co-working space, so they let us use the space in exchange for advertising.
I love the fact that I don't have to be at a newspaper newsroom all day like I did for so many years. So I work all over the place. I start the workday at home, I end at home, but in the middle I go to a co-working space 1 or 2 days a week. My contract I can go to any time, but I go to coffee shops, at City Hall covering stuff, so I'm just all over the place, and actually I like it. You run into people at coffee shops and cultivate sources. And
The news tips, yeah.
Yeah.
I used to work at home, and I worked at home for a long time. I have a really small office there. But then when he came on board, when my husband came on board with me, the office really wasn't big enough for both of us. It was pretty small. So we rent a small suite in our downtown, and it's a small office, but we also have access to a big training room, a couple of conference rooms. There's even a workout facility there that we can use, and it's really reasonably priced. So it's kind of like a co-share.
Does this help you with the separating work and home life?
It has, and yeah.
There's nothing worse when you're on your computer and your cat jumps on your computer.
Yeah.
It screws everything up when you lose everything in your head,
Yes,
on there,
it's
so.
true.
It's also good.
Yeah.
My wife at one point said to me, early on I worked just out of home in coffee shops. My wife said, "You've got to get out of here." And so, but I think it's healthy in a relationship to have,
Yes.
separation in space.
Kenny and his wife at Broad Street Ads, they work together now. She just joined the business within the last year. They work out of their home, but it was funny, they have separate rooms and they communicate via Slack during the day. Which is like really healthy for our relationship. I also build in exercise, so like I got a Fitbit and I looked at my steps and I saw how low they were and I was like, yikes. And so now like when I wake up in the morning, I take a walk for 15 minutes, I'll write for a few hours, I'll take another walk, and it's really helped my my physical and mental health just to do that and take a pause. Riffing off some, like, it's interesting to hear common themes. I was at a WordPress conference recently and the person was talking about running an agency and she said, someone told her, a good business makes money, but a great business makes money without you. And I sort of winced when I heard that because I said, well, I'm on the way to becoming good, but when am I ever going to be great and how can I get there? So like that's one of my goals. That's like part of what motivated me finally to find someone to help run the business side, is because I want to get to that place where I can take that 2-week vacation and not worry. I was actually out on a bike ride biking the Pacific Coast Highway in Oregon with my former boyfriend, and like he was really annoyed because I was checking my phone a few times during the day and my emails, and like it caused a lot of tension. It was a big, part of the tension in the relationship. So, and then also you're just not really productive. Going against what we were told this morning, I can't cite the studies, but many studies have shown that you're just not very productive after a certain number of hours. Like your productivity decreases, I think, after 50 hours. Like it just falls off a cliff. So I realize when I do take breaks and then I go back to do things, I'm much quicker writing the stories. I don't make as many mistakes. I can edit better if I step away for a few minutes and go back. So that's really important. I just met a lot of friends who quit because they were so, they were making money on their sites, but they were just burned, they were burned out, they were fried. So, like, I take days off. Like, I try to take Saturdays off, and I try to automate. So on WordPress, you can schedule content. So, there'll still be content being posted on the site, but I'm not actually running it unless there's a fire or some major breaking news. And that's really helped me not suffer from burnout so much. Do any of you do that? Do you automate?
Yeah, well, so you were talking about taking vacation. I started the site 6.5 years ago. I took our first, my wife and I run the site, and we took our first real vacation in 6.5 years this past, and we took 2 weeks and we went to Paris and London, so we were well away from everything, and I had a chance to actually schedule some posts ahead of time and actually trusted somebody, one of my writers, to actually do the posting, and it was hard to give up that control because when you're so dedicated to this for so many years and you're spending 70 hours a week on this, and then you're finally stepping back and letting somebody else sort of take over, and it worked, and now I know he can do it. So for me, it was a huge relief to finally do that, and I should have done it.
I was just going to say, when you do finally do that, you say, why didn't I do this before?
Right.
It's not that hard. I think part of it, though, does have to do with scaling back your expectations for what you could do. Here's the thing. If you want to work 100 hours a week, you could produce 100 hours a week worth of content. If you don't work 100 hours, you get less content. We all want to get it all in there, but this is true of any newsroom. Newsrooms have a certain amount of capacity that they are able to do for content every week, and they get what they get. And, would you work if you were working for an employer and getting paid a regular salary and getting benefits and all that, would you work 70 hours for that? You wouldn't. You say that there's a limit. And so even though many of us in these businesses are not getting paid very much or at all, we still need to set some kind of a limit. All right, I will work for free to do this and build my business, but I'm only going to work this much, and just try and draw a line and say, that last sports brief, I am not going to do it. I mean, it's as simple as letting a few things go or putting them off a little bit. I mean, all I can say is when you do that, it does become liberating, and you begin to understand just what a captive you are to the business that you started, and that there's going to be as much or as little as you will let there be, and you just have to draw the line.
No. I think letting go and trusting others is really important. That was hard for me to let go of control, and I realized, wow, I am really a control freak. And then also with stories, one of my publisher friends in California was saying it's like a stream, and she sees the stories floating by, and sometimes she just has to wave by. She can't cover it all. You just can't do it all. You can't do it all yourself. And just accepting that, the world is not going to end, and your readers are not going to, the life is not over. It doesn't hurt your business to let some things go. I think just putting it in bigger perspective, when I was just working all the time, I'd forget to call my mom, different things like that. I hadn't called my mother for 3 weeks because I was just so busy. The B word, which I try not to use anymore with people, because when you're saying you're too busy, is what you're saying is you're really not a priority to me, right? So we make times for the things we care about, right? So I'm always thinking about that and being careful with my language now. But my mom had a stroke, and I hadn't talked to her for 3 weeks, and fortunately she's okay. But if she had not been okay, I don't know, I never would have forgiven myself. So after that experience, it really made me shift my priorities, and I make sure I always make time to call her. Or she's in her 70s now. I go and work remotely when I can, and actually she is now a part of Planet Princeton because she was an investigator investigating child sex abuse for 30 years, and she's obsessed. She thought of going to law school to become a family court judge, so now she reads all the lawsuits that are local. So she has my Pacer account, and she gets alerts, and she summarizes all the important cases, and she's helping me write stories. Or I wanted to know how dangerous amusement parks are in New Jersey because someone brought it up at dinner, and she did all this research for me and told me how they're regulated and everything. So it's been great to have her. And I'm why didn't I think of this before? The people in my life who can be helpful in many ways. I have some senior citizens in town who now go and file OPRA requests. In New Jersey, that's a public records law, so they file public records requests for me, and it makes them feel, they're more invested in the site, and it helps me. So thinking of creative ways to have other people help you. Not to be too dramatic, but sometimes I will say to myself, after this happened with my mom, on my deathbed, what am I going to think of all the stories I wasn't able to write? No, I'm going to be thinking about the other things that are more meaningful, just to keep it in perspective. I think there are ways. I'm moving to the next town over because I've been doing this for 7 years, and Princeton, when I think of Princeton, I think of work for me, and I can't go anywhere without people knowing, oh, there's Planet Princeton, oh, they want to talk about a story, they want to complain about something. I feel like there's no separation between my work life and my private life, so I'm moving 10 minutes away, just because maybe that sounds crazy to people. Princeton's also outrageously expensive. I'm the last reporter who can afford, who's living, I have a housemate to afford living there. It's that's not sustainable for me anymore, so I'm looking forward to having more of that work-life separation by living the next town over. And just in terms of self-care, I realized I hadn't had a physical in 2 years because that wasn't a priority for me. Things like that, just basic self-care to, you can't make your business sustainable if you're not around anymore to, take care. It might seem obvious, but a lot of people forgo dental care, health care, checkups, exercise, things like that. I went to a silent retreat for 3 days, and they didn't allow you to use your cell phone or laptop or anything. It was the best thing for my mental health. I felt so refreshed from that. I don't know, didn't you go to a retreat? were you telling me you went to a
I
retreat?
did, yes.
What was it called? I went to get the name of that.
I went to a 10-day silent retreat to do Vipassana meditation
Mm-hmm.
in 29 Palms. It's free. You get free food.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just reminded me, in the middle of running my business, I had not been active for many years, and I got hooked up with a bunch of guys that play soccer, and started playing a regular pickup game, and it's turned into a 3 times a week thing. But that was another thing that was missing from my life when I was at the 70-hour-a-week stage, and I suddenly came up with some time that I was going to do this, and that was for me. And you can get away from it on the field there. In my case, I never really worked weekends. I did manage to, I had that office where I worked Monday through Friday, and I did manage to keep myself, apart from breaking news. I mean, certainly there were things that happened, accidents or fires or something like that, but for the most part, I didn't work on weekends. And I think you got to just wall that off and make it part of the routine that is part of your business. But I'm curious, other people, what do you guys do as far as, you're a family business. I mean, you have a place to work. How do you separate?
Well, we have an office, yeah. I start out working early in the morning in my home office and then shift over to the office we have downtown. We rent a space. It's pretty reasonable. And it's a decent
Denise
size.
Civiletti from-
Yeah, I'm sorry, Riverhead Local. And and it's a family business, but that's another, if you're in this with your spouse, there's you have to work hard to talk about something else sometimes, it's like, and I hate that. I miss having the relationship I used to have with him before we work in the same business, and a business that never really goes away because, the police scanner's on and things happen and whatever. And, on weekends, there are all these events and things all the time that we feel compelled to cover. And, so weekends, especially in, from May to November, and then there's another burst around the Christmas holiday, there's just always something going on. So
And I had a couple of freelancers that I leaned on for weekend stuff, which is another way you can do this. You don't have to do it all yourself.
yeah,
That's what I do. I have contractors who work weekends.
Right.
Also, reader contributed, so I don't have to go take that photo, so I've set up, my readers know that I welcome submissions from them, so someone goes to a rally, I get 20, 30 photos sent from different readers, so.
Yeah, how many accept community content, which is the way I would describe that? Yeah, it's a good idea. Sometimes it relieves the pressure of having to cover all that stuff on weekends, or honestly, it gets you stuff you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. If people know that they can send it to you and they get invested in the site, it helps build your popularity.
we definitely supplement with that, but there's some things we feel like we have to do. So.
You mentioned that too. I run a site that deals with music and entertainment, so of course weekends and nights are, we're running all over the
That's
place.
your business.
But I have tried doing some reader reviews of some shows. Don Dillon doesn't like to take photos of them anyway, so, and it's amazing how many people submitted these mini reviews of what they thought of the concert and how different they all thought it was, and ended up generating a lot of traffic. It was actually kind of fun, and I didn't have to sign a viewer of the show. It was actually kind of fun.
So you take off a weekday instead?
No, I usually don't, but I do play tennis, and I have always made that kind of like a religious thing.
Sacred,
I do not
man.
get on my tennis night. I've always had that throughout this whole thing, and that was probably saved my life. Because without that, I don't know, I'd never get any exercise.
Anyone else?
One of the things we do, we curate news in addition to generating our own. So if I'm going to be out of town, my wife and I took a 3-week trip. First 2 weeks it was a bicycle tour of Vietnam, and then we went to Cambodia. And while we were gone, we were a nonprofit. One of my volunteers basically did the curation. So we weren't generating a lot of original news during that period, but we still had content coming every day because of the curation going on. So that was really helpful.
I guess just getting back to the headline here, you got to. I am giving you permission, and you got to give yourself permission to get away from it and to not get to everything. And the minute that you incorporate that into your thinking, it makes it a lot easier to not get burned out, to not ruin your marriage, whatever. I think it's just you got to see it that way. And if you don't see it that way, you'll end up working yourself into the ground.
What are folks' opinions on interns. I've had interns every year for the last 5 years, and the great thing about it is that they're very eager and excited to cover concerts and festivals, and so I don't have to be there, and they can be there, and I can cover more stuff because they're there. Frustration is it takes a lot of time to develop these young writers, if that's what they think they are, and photographers. So it's almost. I just wonder how other people's experience has been, whether or not that helps in terms of leading some of the workload.
However you can swing it, I would say, either I prefer to call them volunteers. Anyway, there is a sticky issue as far as the law goes about interns.
You're supposed to pay now.
You're supposed to pay. But, I mean, that doesn't keep people from volunteering for you, and that's the way that I considered it. And I had some great volunteers, but you're right, like, depending on their level of experience, it can take a lot of your time to do it. And I did have interns from one of the local high schools, a private school, and they got credit for it, so I felt okay about that. But they did require a lot, and I tried to structure it so that, I did have the time to work with them on things, but I did get things out of them as well, so it was a mutual thing. But, again, if your business is growing and big enough and you can afford to pay a freelancer for something, that's another way to cover some of these things that will relieve you of some of that pressure. Your goal for your business plan, I think, should be to get to a point where you can afford to hire people full-time to do some of these things and really build it to where, once you get full-timers, then you can say, are we good? I'm taking off, and you can build in that time for yourself to get away, whether it's a day off, a night off, or a 3-week vacation to Asia, whatever it is. So what about other people?
I use the timing aspect on WordPress a lot. The beat that I cover is what the city government is up to. And so I write a lot about, the planning commission is going to be looking at this on Wednesday night, and if this is something you have an opinion about, you ought to go, and this is the background on it and stuff. But as long as the city has posted their agendas a week ahead of time, which they have, I can write up all of my write-ups for the week a week ahead of time. The other newsletter I do, and it also goes on my website, is daily business news. And generally that's not particularly timely, and so I can write 7 of those up in advance. So I'm able to, I work a lot the week before I go out of town, but then I can go out of town. I can also, because a lot of it is, covering the city, I can do it remotely. And so I did my what's happening in my town for a month from London, and nobody knew.
How about using interns? Do other people use interns?
I've used interns over the summer and paid them minimum wage. But I picked students who San Diego has two good student newspapers. So I picked students who've been on the student newspapers and knew how to write, basically.
Somebody else over there. Bill?
Had very mixed experiences with interns. Some have been pretty good, and some pretty awful. And at the moment, I'm not seeking out interns.
I mean, if you could get the good ones like you're talking about, boy, it's like having a full-timer. I mean, I had 2 interns during my time that really were regular and reliable, and I could send them to things. And one of them is a researcher for an Asian think tank in DC now, and the other one just started her first job at a TV station in Wisconsin. And it's fun to watch their careers develop. But, for every 2 of those, there's 10 who are like not worth the time.
That's true, but I feel like for those of us that have been in journalism for as many years as we have, I think we have an obligation to try to raise that next generation of writers. And I think even when I've had to struggle with some of the interns that I've had over the years, all of them have had a good experience. From their perspective, they would tell me they've had a good experience, and that some of them have gone on to get jobs. And I've had at least 3 of them that are still freelancing for me long after they left. They have other jobs, but they're still freelancing for me part-time. So there is a value in it. I feel like I'm passing on at least some skills and some knowledge that I've got over the years. And I think that's an important part of the satisfaction you get in doing what you do.
Anybody else have strategies for giving yourself personal time and separating work and life?
Well, if you If you can partner with other publications, I don't mean in your local neighborhood, but other publications that might have content that you could use for your own, that you can pre-post before you go on vacation. We regularly look at courthouse news, for example. Just use their search function for Wisconsin, and if there's there's an interesting court case that involves Wisconsin, we'll post that. I mean, we've got blanket permission to do that from them. They're very good about that. That you can post as long as you post a link to their site and give them credit for it. There are a number of publications that will allow that, and that can really help bolster your content so that it's not just a bunch of little stuff when you're gone. So when I'm getting ready to go on a trip, I don't really take days off for the most part. But I will work in the morning and then be done in the afternoon. We went to Florida last year, and I just made a policy of it that by 11:30 I was done for the day, and that's hard because, man, you think you have you not only have a responsibility to your readers, but you have a responsibility to your advertisers too, because they're relying on you to get attention to their products. So it's a lot of it's hard to walk away. But I mean, if you can have some quality content on your site, that's good. We also use citizen journalists to cover some city and county meetings and community meetings that write blog posts for us, and that helps cover the load. And I'm lucky enough to have a part-timer, but until I did, it was hard to get away. But I mean, that's something that you can do. Look for some of those publications, like Center for Public Integrity will often share their content. You just have to ask them ahead of time. There's a lot of the nonprofit publications that are listed in the INN Partners Index. They're very good about sharing their content as long as you ask permission and go by the republishing guidelines.
I have a question. How many people sit down like once a week and plan out their week and like do So, because I felt like I was very reactive at the beginning for the first few years, and then like I've been listening to the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People on CD, and a friend gave me this passion planner. I brought one with me. And like I had to do my map of like, where do I see myself in 3 months, a year, 3 years, 10 years. It was kind of scary. Actually, I didn't want to do it for a while, but it was really helpful. And and then you plan your week. There's a whole map for every week, and I list like, what are the top 3 important things I want to accomplish this week? Like revising my media kit, hiring that ad salesperson, redoing my mobile design for my website. Like those important things that you have to do for long-term sustainability. And then you have the list of those stories that he would call that, Stephen Covey would call that like the urgent and important quadrant. Like it's so easy as a journalist to get stuck on that little, that little hamster wheel, the urgent and important, and sort of blow off the bigger picture important things. So it's been really helpful for me. Like every Sunday night I sit there for a half an hour to an hour. I reflect on like what went well the last week. What do I need to do this week? And then also, it's helped me to learn to say no to people, because I realized, like, I was stuck in the quadrant he'd call urgent but not important, and that's like other people's priorities. So like people who want to see you at that community brunch or some other meeting where you're going out of a sense of obligation to other people, and but you really don't need to go. So like it's really helped me to say no. Anyone else have? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I do a very intense every night. I go and plan the next day. I mean, I do a week-long thing too, but I try to make sure that each day, because things change and the sequence changes, and I have a list that I try to methodically go down and cross off. The list is usually not stories. The list is QuickBooks or paying the staff or fixing some WordPress problem.
What do people have other what are like some of your struggles or like pain points? I mean, that brought you to this that you want to we haven't addressed, or that you want to talk about more in the few minutes we have left.
Why are you looking at me?
Because I know you. We're friends, I guess. That's why.
I'm in pain.
I mean, struggles is that the work-life balance, like probably more than anything else. I think, I tend to work every day. Also, I have the same strategy where, a day off is I get up super early in the morning, so I'll get up and I'll work until, if I succeed in working until 10 or 11 and take the rest of the day off, that's like a day off. And it really is. And then I try to totally disengage. I don't look at my phone. I don't look at my computer. I don't listen to the scanner.
How often do you get to do that?
I try to do that on weekends. Like if I'm not mostly Sundays because there's things going on Saturdays. But I'll put in my headphones and I listen to a book and I will clean and do laundry and just do that sort of thing. And that's kind of like time off.
One of the problems is we get into that zone where we're doing a really good job of covering our communities, and people have said to me, "You're everywhere."
Yeah.
And I was everywhere, and that's a good thing, but it's not a good thing either. You've got to get it back to your 75% of everywhere.
Well, and like you said about saying, okay, I don't have to do everything. We have a direct competitor in the market. It's a weekly newspaper. They have a website. They have like 10 or 12 people. I don't know how many people they have. It seems like in terms of reporters and things. And, I manage to outrun them all the time. I don't even know how I do it. But, sometimes they'll be at something or, I don't go to necessarily all the meetings anymore. I won't go to every planning board meeting, only if it's something that I think is significant. That, believe it or not, was a big step for me to let go of that. Because I would just, there's a meeting, so I should be there. But it's stupid. So you need to adjust your expectations.
That's interesting. So, when I was doing mine, we had 4 towns that we covered, and I felt like we needed to go to every town board meeting, and because I felt like we were we were out there recording this for everybody.
Town board, yeah.
And you get to the point where you have to be judicious, and I like the way you put that. Is there anything important? I mean, one of the things that people get from us that they don't get from the town website is some sense of what's important. And so if there isn't anything important, I think it's okay for us to say that. Or say, you know what, the meeting's Tuesday night, I don't want to work Tuesday night, this issue is coming up, I could do it on Wednesday when I get to the office, or Thursday, or, write about it in a form that's not here's what happened last night, but kind of a broader story about that issue or something, where you don't have to do it on deadline and, take a little pressure off yourself about covering those night meetings.
Half the times those are better stories anyway.
Yeah, well, that's the context.
Yeah.
I think it's about not working harder, but working smarter. Mm-hmm. And I think sitting at a 2-hour city council meeting when there's maybe one thing that you want to cover is a colossal waste of time. And it took me a long time to be able to admit that. Luckily, most of our meetings are either televised or I have somebody who can go if there's something. So if it's televised, I can record it on a DVR and we can sit and have a cocktail and watch it. And stand through the crowd. Yeah, and just watch what we need to watch. But if you don't have that kind of thing, you can make a couple of calls the next day and save yourself a whole lot of time. It's hard to do that, but sometimes you have to make that choice.
Most of the time, we don't get anything from the city till the day before of their agenda.
Yeah, they don't even post their agenda until the day before because they're so disorganized. But
well, in most places, that's all that's required, right? So
yeah.
I find when I feel like I need to go to a meeting, I try to use that time to multitask.
Mm-hmm.
I have a recorder, I'll record, and I'll sit on my computer and I'll edit obituaries, or I have somebody that does rewrite, but I edit it before I put it up, and I'll do that sort of stuff. I'll organize my emails or whatever, so that I'm not just sitting there, waiting for them to say something stupid, which they never disappoint, but
I agree on that.
So.
How much time do y'all program in sharpening the saw to get better at what we've been doing the last 3 days of getting better at your profession? Is that a day out of the week, or 3 hours a week, or you were talking about planning? Do you plan that in?
Well, I'm really involved in the WordPress community in my area, so we have a monthly meetup, and I help organize annual WordPress camp. So, in terms of tech skills, journalism, I spend a certain amount of time every day actually reading, from the Neiman website, INN, things like that. like you could spend a few hours a day if you wanted to, just trying to keep up on things, but.
Or building something. I mean, we all get, if you're on all the right email lists, you get all these offers of like a video you can watch or an article you can read. And honestly, I don't think I built that into my schedule, but that is something that is worth thinking about. Should I build in an hour a week, or what can you afford? An hour every 2 weeks to do that. I will say that, we always try to make time for getting to events like this. There, being able to network and talk to other people about what we're doing. I mean, we do it for the news we cover. We should be doing it for the skills and tools that we have as well. Learning some aspect of your CMS or whatever, all of those things are really important to build in. And elsewhere during this conference, people have talked about building in the time for the financial planning that needs to go into running your business as well. I mean, they all need to be on the list. There's the news planning, there's the financial side of your business, there's the training piece, and again, blanket permission granted to go on vacation. Build that into your planning and figure out how to make it happen. So
sometimes I have my best ideas, first of all in the shower. It's like it's like the relaxation response, or like knitting or something, or like going on a trip on vacation. And it's weird how things just pop into your head when you're not working.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Good luck. Send me the postcard. Your next vacation.